What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life's a Garden. We are celebrating Mother's Day this week on the show, and what better way than to have back on the long-awaited return of my mother. Last time, we talked about her childhood, we talked about some of her past. So if you haven't seen the last episode, please go back and watch that one first and then watch this one because we're kind of just going to pick up where we left off. She was, in fact, Guest of the Year last year for the LAG Awards. So let's see what happens this time around. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Shellie Fisher. All right. Welcome back.
Thank you.
First of all, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
And congratulations on over 1 year sober.
Yeah.
That's what you told me the other day.
Yeah.
What's the exact?
I'm not sure.
Oh, well, it's over a year.
Yeah.
Right. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Actually, a year in drug court. Yeah.
Okay. I do want to mention, just to kick it off, because I think this is a nice starting point. First of all, I do want to mention to everybody, we do have new lighting in here, and I'm still trying to figure out how to adjust it, but I think it looks better. Right?
Yeah.
Moving up, improving.
Yep.
It's episode 150.
Oh,
How about that?
that's a good deal.
Yeah. So we're just
Lucky number.
step by step. That's your lucky number?
No,
Oh.
but it is today.
Oh, it's an even number.
Yeah.
But I did want to start off with this because I thought this was kind of funny. You did, in fact, invite me to a drug court session.
Yes.
That,
Family night.
yeah. And it was definitely not exactly what I thought it was going to be.
Me either.
I kind of wish I had been on drugs. Because then maybe I would have had something to talk about. But, yeah. It was good. Like, it wasn't bad. It was just definitely interesting.
It was boring.
It reminded me of being back in school.
I know.
Like, for one, it reminded me of being back in school. I really didn't have anything I could contribute.
Was that on codependency? Oh, enabling.
Well, same thing.
Yeah.
It was on codependency and enabling, which I was like, I don't really know that I've done a lot of that.
No, you haven't.
But, yeah, I don't know. That part, and then they handed out a booklet about drinking and safe drinking, and then I was like, I think I'm going to go have a beverage right now. Like, I knew already I was going to go down and watch a game or something like that,
Right.
so I was like, this is nice that they gave me this right before I go drink.
Yeah.
But no, it was good, and it was kind of harrowing hearing some of the tales that people have to tell
Right.
in there.
Everybody's story's different.
True that.
And being an addict isn't easy.
No. But it's different when you have to hear everybody's story.
Yeah.
And like when it's in front of you, I guess. And that's why I was like, God, I have like zero to contribute to this. Like, for one, I drugs would have helped me get through it, the class, and two, I would have at least been able to contribute to the conversation.
Well, I mean, you came from two addictive parents, so
I know. It's just my brain doesn't like
think like that.
Well, it doesn't compute that stuff, I
Right.
guess. I don't know. That's just me.
You lived right in the thick of it,
I remember.
you know.
I do remember.
You've been through raids of the house. You might not remember that because you were really young.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I remember stopping somebody from stabbing you. Well, I didn't. I stopped somebody from stabbing the person that was trying to choke you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting life.
Uh-huh. And I think I blocked a lot of that out because I'm sure there's some residual effects that certain parts of my childhood had on me,
That you blocked out, probably.
or just like subconsciously in there that like made me be a certain way.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm really proud of you, because for being and going through everything that you did, you have a really genuine lifestyle right now and always have.
I think that's part of it, though. I think part of it is like not wanting to
Follow in the footsteps.
No, well, that a little bit, but more than anything, not wanting to live in that way.
Right.
Like, that's why I make sure my bills are paid, because I don't want the power to be off, or like things like that. And that's not just you. I mean, we had to deal with that stuff with grandma and stuff, because we were just living off welfare.
Right.
And it's like, that's another thing I don't want to be in a situation where I have to like rely on the government or rely on welfare. I know people have to, and that's cool, and that's great that program is there for them, but I don't want to have to do that ever again.
Well, I didn't ever want to do it either, but it's hard being a single mom raising kids.
And like that's why I'm saying I'm glad that that's there for people.
Right. Yeah.
It really sickens me, the people who do like
take advantage of the situation.
Yeah. So I would never want to be that person anyway, but it's like, I don't know, because of having to grow up that way, I don't ever want to have to live that way again.
Right.
And that includes, it goes back to, friends of mine who had rough households too, like dirty houses and things like that. I'm like, that's why I'm clean. I didn't like that. So I try and keep my things nice.
Well, all in all, you always had a pretty nice house to live in.
Yeah.
There were times where
it was on and off.
Yeah.
Like, but you're right. Like, for the most part. Although it's like, when you're young, you don't really think about that stuff.
No.
Like, that's kind of.
I mean, you were homeless a couple times.
But also, again, never really like. If I had put in perspective the way I would today, some of the situations we were in then, like you said, couch surfing with grandma, living at Dave Leeper's house,
living at the Lewis and Clark Motel.
Right. Like, we didn't even think a thing about it. Like,
No.
we knew it wasn't right. We knew it wasn't like tradition to be living at a motel, but we were kind of like, oh, this is different. This is fun. Like, this is whatever. We're gonna. It wasn't like a trial and tribulation type of situation in our minds back there, or at least in mine.
Well, do you feel like you had a happy childhood?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to like really digest that question, because yes, yeah, I do. I don't think it was happy in the traditional way of.
We didn't take vacations.
Well, see, that's the thing though. Like, I owe a lot to team mentoring,
right.
and to like Shauna and Jay, and to Tony. Help me with his.
I can't remember.
Sargent.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Sargent, and his wife Denise, who started the team mentoring program. I just want to like mention their names.
And team mentoring is when one of your parents is incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
They had a program that helped you guys, sponsored you guys.
Well, it started off as just like you'd get a bunch of kids who had parents incarcerated, and then you'd get together and do like a game night and pizza party and things like that, and you just like socialize with other kids who are dealing with the same thing. Then they team you up with mentors, or in that sense, it was kind of parental figures.
Yeah.
People who could kind of see. That's the thing of it is, like, when I look back at that, I never looked at them like parents. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
They weren't parental figures in my mind. They were adults
that were doing a good deed.
Well, no, they were adults that like were friends and like took us to movies, or like took us to events, the fair, little things like that.
Right.
Things that we probably weren't going to be able to do otherwise. And so we got to do that. But at the same time, it's like that wasn't completely true either, because like I went to concerts as a kid, and I remember going to the fair with Dawn, and But also, like, there was times Dawn wasn't exactly, you know, on the straight and narrow.
Right.
But then, over time, we became closer friends, family friends with people in team mentoring, and then they would take us on vacations and things like that. Like, I truly do believe, like, I got to do way more based on the situation given to us. I got to do way more stuff than I ever probably would have otherwise.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like made our own opportunities as well.
It made you strong, made you who you are today. I mean, when you live a rough life, it seems like you come out to be a little bit stronger, a little bit more self-reliant.
Yeah, it gives you perspective. It gives you, yeah, it's overall good. So, like, I think I definitely came out of it better in the end anyway. But that's the thing, is everybody has their own story, like you said.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own story where it's like, maybe you didn't grow up in a rough household or whatever, and you still ended up learning lessons through other things.
Right.
Or you grew up in a good household and you end up going down a bad path. Like,
which is exactly what my situation is.
but, every situation's different, so it's
Right.
like, I don't know. So, going back on that, let's pick up where we left off before.
Okay.
We were in your teenage years.
Well, my teenage years were probably, I mean, like I say, I've been an addict since I was 10 years old in one form or another. So when I was 14, I met this kid. His name was Steve. And that was my first love. And also my start into the world of hard narcotics. I mean, wasn't at the time when I was going with him, which was for 3 years, there wasn't any drug that we didn't sample or try, irregardless of. I mean, I wasn't scared of drugs. It had just become a way of life for me. And we had been together 3 years. I was working at Kmart. And I didn't get off till 10 o'clock usually. Well, I came home early one night. I lived with my parents. He lived in his own apartment. And I caught him with another woman, another girl, and proceeded to go in the kitchen and consume large quantities of whiskey. At what point he came out and started beating me severely to the point where he broke both of my arms. Well, there was a knife laying on the kitchen counter, and I stabbed him multiple times. I would say, I don't know, multiple times. To the point where somebody called the law, and both of us got taken to the hospital. My parents got called to come pick me up, and he ended up leaving with us. Yeah.
Well, that's...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because his parents, I don't know where they were. He didn't really...
How does that work? Like,
yeah.
They put up a barrier in the back seat so you don't stab him again?
No, I was just in such shock, but they dropped him off.
You're in like 2 casts and
right.
like...
And he has multiple stab wounds.
That's an interesting scenario.
None of them were life-threatening, I mean...
Did you get an attempted murder charge?
No, actually, because back then, if you didn't press charges, I was a minor.
Oh.
And so was he. So basically my folks came. They could have pressed charges if they wanted to, but they just wanted to just get me home. And after that instance, I just turned my back on him. I didn't have anything else to do with him, fortunately. But then after you go through something like that, your self-esteem goes lower than ever. And my self-esteem went. I already didn't have a high self-esteem. I always thought that I wasn't attractive, and I would see other girls and I would always wish that I could be like that, I didn't like myself at all. And so from after him and I separated, I went on just a mass chaotic runner. And I started selling coke for this guy named Larry. I first met him because I was cleaning buildings with the lady named Mary Frances. And she introduced me to this gentleman that was selling a lot of cocaine. So I started selling cocaine for him. And by this time I was like, I don't know, 17, 18 maybe, probably 17, and started selling large quantities of coke for him. Well, I ended up getting in debt to him for quite a large sum of money. And I think actually that was his game, was to get me involved and in debt, because that led to him having me go live with him and basically be an escort for him. I know. There's some things you're gonna hear that you probably don't want to hear, but my parents, we lived out in Acton with this guy. I lived out in Acton with him, and basically I was doing that to help pay off my bill to him, but it never was getting paid off. It just seemed like I was forever, having to be under his control.
So you stabbed him too?
No, so I burned his house down.
Oh.
One night, I had just had enough of it, and and so I remember distinctly spraying hairspray on the floor. Why I thought this was a good idea, I don't know, and then lighting the hairspray on fire. And I stayed in the basement, and that's where I did it. Not a very good plan on my part, but it started on fire, which was close to the hot water heater, which in return, I knew at that time, I thought, I've got to get out of here. At that point, I didn't care really if I lived or died. I think half of the reason why I did it was just to escape that life, and just escape life, period. I'd had enough by that time. But I ended up crawling out a basement window. I didn't know if he was in the house or not. I didn't care if he was in the house or not. And when I started walking, Acton, I don't know if you know how far it is from Billings.
It's good 10 miles?
At least, yeah. So I started walking. I didn't have any shoes on. And back then, there was no such thing as a cell phone.
Yeah.
So I walked into...
I mean, what, there's like 18 something, right?
Yeah.
1850?
No, Dakota. I'm really saying yes. I would say 1976 because I had graduated from high school. Yeah. So it was in that time frame. But it was a long time ago, and there wasn't cell phones. So I walked to this house, the closest house, and I called my parents. Well, my parents were just flabbergasted by the whole thing. House is burning. I didn't tell them that I had just...
That you had committed arson?
Yeah. And maybe...
Murder.
Possibly murder, yeah. But, so they couldn't come right then for some reason, so I called one of Larry's friends that I knew his phone number, and proceeded to have him take me to my folks' house, and also at the same time hooked up with him. Just finished getting in and out of a situation like that, and then jumped right into another sick, abusive relationship. Because of low self-esteem, you can't go out of a environment where you had been basically sex trafficked, is what it would be called nowadays. But back then it was just called being an escort. And there were several, it has to be hard for you to hear that your mom was an escort at one time. Probably nothing would surprise you anymore about my life. But, yeah, so I was staying at my mom and dad's house, and very seldom ever there. I was mostly with Kevin, who was this other gentleman that I had met, and he was quite a bit older than I was. I was probably 18, 19 by this time, and he was probably 35, 40 years old. And I remember we were taking trips to not Las Vegas, but to Elko, Nevada, and Winnemucca, Nevada. And I always had lots of jewelry, nice things, but I wasn't ever allowed to go anywhere without him. So basically, if I wasn't with him, I was at home. And I'd have contact with my parents maybe once a month, maybe. And I know they were worried so bad because they were really good parents. I was just a really broke child. And so I remember we went to the bucking horse sale in Miles City. And whenever we would go anywhere, I would be the one to take the money in to wherever it was, gas stations, supermarkets, you name it. I would be the one to go in and buy the stuff and pay for it. Well, we went to the bucking horse sale, and I went into a convenience store, and I paid with a 20, and next thing I know, cops were everywhere. The FBI was there. The whole place was surrounded. Kevin was out in the car, and when all these people showed up, he just drove off and left me in this convenience store because it had passed a counterfeit $20 bill. And at that time, I had no clue that that's what he'd been up to, that's why we were taking all these trips, so that I could launder his money for him. Well, of course, I got questioned by tobacco and firearms and whatnot. Well, I didn't know anything about his counterfeit. I had absolutely no idea what was going on with him. But there again, I had to call my parents. They had to come to Miles City to pick me up. And my dad, I remember my dad crying. He was so, he just couldn't understand why I just couldn't be normal. Why I just couldn't be a normal kid. Why I had to be the way I was. And if I knew why I was the way I was, I would try to have changed. But like I say, that had just become a lifestyle for me. I needed the drugs. My body felt like I needed the drugs. My mind felt like it needed the drugs. So I just continued. Well, by that time, when my folks took me back home, I settled down for a little bit. And at that point then, of course, being sex trafficked or prostituted out, basically, led me to, I just went out looking for somebody to love me, which led to very promiscuous behavior. But I just kept hoping that I would find that one person that would love me, because I felt like I knew my parents loved me, but I was looking for a different kind of love. And between the drugs and the alcohol, I always chose men that definitely wouldn't love me, And so it was probably 1979, maybe 1980 something, when I met Chuck, who later became the uncle to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought that was a very interesting...
yeah, it's kind of a mixed up scenario.
Yeah. So go ahead and explain for everybody.
Well, he was the brother. We got married, but we got divorced. And then right after we got divorced, I hooked up with a guy. No, that's not true, because I met Ashley's dad.
Yeah, I was going to say, where does that fall into this?
I met Ashley's dad. And
So wait, let's go back just a second. So you married Chuck first.
Yes.
Okay, so where do you meet Chuck?
I just met him at a party.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old?
God, probably 18, 19. No, I was probably 19 by that time.
Okay.
Because I had my fair share of drinking and partying. We met him at a party, which is not a good place to meet your future husband.
Hang on, I'm going to turn these lights down just a second.
Okay.
Keep talking. I feel like it's going to look better.
Keep talking?
Yeah.
Okay, so I met him at a party, and we decided to get married, which I don't even know why. Because I don't really think I was in love with him. I just thought that it might be a better choice for me. something I probably wanted to try. So we got married. And that lasted all of about 4 years, maybe a little longer. And then I just left one night. He was at work. I just packed a bag and just left him. Wrote a note.
How long married? How long?
4 years.
Oh, wow.
It was a little bit of period of time. It's probably the longest that I was with anybody. But I just was always looking and thinking the grass was greener on the other side, that I was going to meet somebody else that was better for me. So I moved back to my parents' house once again.
Is this the same house that on Pueblo?
On Pueblo, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Moved back to my parents' house and finally got my own little apartment. And that's when I met Ashley's dad, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was in such a tumultuous lifestyle, he decided that it would be better if we moved to Iowa to get away from everything.
Fucking Iowa.
So I moved to Iowa with him. And he was abusive, very verbally and physically abusive. But right when I was going to leave him, I found out I was pregnant with Ashley. So him and I were together probably 5 years. At that point, when things were really falling apart right after I had her, I decided to move to Polson, Montana.
I love Polson.
It was a nice place. It was.
The whole Flathead area, I like it.
Yeah. We lived kind of up in the mountains. We were running a cherry orchard. And he did come with me. Which...
Craig?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which a few years after that, things were just not working well. So he moved back to Iowa. Yeah. And I stayed in Polson for a few more years, and it was just...
With Ashley.
With Ashley. She was just a baby, but I turned into just a terrible drunk. Just a terrible drunk up there. I was not a good mother. I hate to say that because you always try and think that you're a good mother, or at least in your mind you think you are. But I was a horrible mom. And so Ashley and I moved back to Billings and in with my mom and dad for a period of time. And then I got my own house. I got a good job at Kmart. Or at Herberger's, at Herberger's. I soon became manager. My lifestyle had calmed down. I had my own place. It was just Ashley and I. And it was becoming a career. I mean, I became a department head. I was the store manager and trainer. It was probably the best I had felt about myself ever. And then I met your dad. I had known your dad. Your dad and I dated when we were both in high school.
Oh, okay.
And that didn't last very long. Because your dad was just as wild as I was. But I remember being at a bar one night at the 17 Club, and your dad came up to me. And when I was with your dad, he had really long hair.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he always wore in a ponytail. He was a super good-looking kid. And
is this when he was running the 17, or
no?
Okay.
No, this was just when he was just out partying at the 17. Well, I didn't even recognize him because he was bald by then, and he had a cowboy hat on, which is totally different from what I ever thought he would be. So I didn't recognize him. Well, needless to say, one thing led to another, and we started dating, or whatever you call it. And I soon became pregnant with you.
So wait, no, real quick. This is kind of where... So you said you were on the straight and narrow a little bit.
Yeah.
Working at Herberger's. And then... Was there a part of you that was, like, holding back those, like, wanting to go out and get back in that lifestyle? Or
I
like
was still going out. You know, my
Okay.
folks would babysit Ashley, and I would go out, and I would disappear for sometimes 2 or 3 days.
So it was always still kind of there.
It was always there. Yeah, I never.
It was just a little bit more tame.
Yeah, I was at least holding down a steady job.
Okay.
But yeah, I would still go out and party and still get drunk and still do drugs and go back, get my daughter, and then go to pretend like I lived a normal life.
Okay.
And then of course I found out I was pregnant with you, and sad to say, but I used through my whole pregnancy with you.
Oh. Well, that explains why I'm such a piece of shit. No, I'm just
You're not. You're not.
God, so I was that close to being some kind of
addicted child,
or mentally
or maybe
fetal
one.
alcohol syndrome or some shit.
I mean, I worried about that. I worried about that through my whole pregnancy, but that wasn't enough to make me quit. You know. And then Don, your uncle, moved in with me because your dad, of course, your dad kept saying it wasn't his baby. It wasn't his baby. So
how do we know I am?
Well, because I kind of know who I was with at that time.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
there wasn't a whole string of people that maybe could have been your dad, because he was probably the last person I would have chose. You know, I mean, he definitely wasn't a good partner, so to say. You know, we were only on and off together.
It seems like a running theme with the gentleman.
It definitely was.
Kind of a not a great cast of characters.
No, very not. And it didn't get any better. You know?
Although, I will say, in Rocky's defense, he was around for a small, like, I remember him being around.
Yeah, he was.
For a certain time.
Yeah. I mean, of all of the people that I have been with, I would say Rock was probably the best provider. He wasn't the best at working, but he always had money.
Well, yeah, I mean, fair enough. Tony Soprano, but
right, and that's kind of the way Rock was. But I remember with your dad, Don, your uncle basically took the spot of your dad. He moved in with me, and I remember Don was so nervous about me having you that he packed his little bag to go to the hospital. I didn't ever pack a bag, Don did. But the night that you were born, Don was nowhere to be found because he wanted to be up there so bad.
Well, you told him to go out, right? That's how I remember this
Yeah,
story
I
going.
told him because he wouldn't leave me alone. He followed me from room to room to room, just thinking that it was going to happen any time. You know, while he was gone, my water broke, and I drove myself to the hospital. So your grandma and my mom finally came up there. I think my dad too was there, but your dad was nowhere around. And when somebody ran into him at some kind of event, they told him, "Hey, your kid's born." He said, "That's not my kid." So that broke my heart. You know, I mean.
Yet you still named my middle name after him?
I did.
So you did spell my name wrong on the birth certificate?
No, he spelled it wrong when he went up and got the other copy. When he had his name put on there. Okay, I spelled it wrong. But I blamed it on him.
And all this time I've been telling the story that he spelled his own name wrong.
Well, you know, honesty isn't necessarily in the vocabulary of an addict. Honesty isn't exactly.
So my name is forever spelt wrong. It's all right. I really don't care anyway.
It's spelled all right.
It's not correct.
But it's spelled okay.
Anyway.
You can tell it's Timothy. But yeah, so it took a long time for your dad to really come around.
So what, obviously there was no, like, DNA test or
No.
something. So like, what was the deciding factor that I was in fact
I have
for him?
I have no idea. I really don't know.
Because I'm redheaded with.
I mean, you look exactly like him. A lot.
But he had like darker hair, and then I had red hair, like.
And he had brown eyes.
Right. So there's.
But I'm Irish.
Right.
And the Irish gene.
Well, and so is he technically. Like he has Irish blood in him.
Yeah.
All of his brothers are redheaded
Yeah.
and darker eyed, though, right?
Yeah, they're all brown eyes. John's not.
God, I'm so glad I didn't. Poop eyes. Love them blue eyes.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know what ever made him decide that he was going to be a father figure.
Neither do I.
I don't. I really don't.
It took about 20-some years.
Yeah. Yeah, it did.
Or something like that. No, I mean...
he would breeze in and out.
I know, yeah. I'm not going to, like...
You would go stay with them, and then I would go off running and acting crazy, and then...
Well, and to his, I'll say this as well. I do remember times in high school and middle school and where he'd come to basketball games or certain, maybe not basketball games, but like certain things.
Birthday parties.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Graduation party, he was there for those things. And I will admit that I also have a part of distancing myself from him. Which, in and of itself, is not. It's still kind of a him problem because there was a reason I did that.
Right.
But I was not as open arms when he decided he wanted to be part of that too. So it's a very fluctuating relationship.
What was going through your mind?
What do you mean?
I mean, with all this stuff that was going on, I mean, did you ever wonder?
Like with him?
Uh-huh.
And you and...
Well, I mean, we had a nice house. We moved in to my mom and dad's house. We lived there.
I think I kind of chose to disassociate a lot of like...
You were in your own world a lot. You lived in your own world a lot.
But I think, okay, so when I look, I really don't have like a distinct... I remember all the I remember moving and living with grandma and visiting you in jail and dad being in Colorado and you know.
Okay, after you were born, we lived in that little house by Pioneer Park.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met Rocky, who was my first husband's brother.
Yeah. And that's where the weird triangle.
Yeah. That's where the Bermuda Triangle.
So what's the year gap between you divorcing from Chuck and then meeting Rocky? And then like not meeting Rocky, I'm assuming you knew him.
Yeah, I did. I don't know the time frame. I would say
we can
Ash was born in 1987.
Okay.
And I was with her dad.
So it's
for a year before she was born.
So about 10 years.
Yeah.
Because Asia was born in 96.
Yeah. That sounds right.
About a year, about 10 years.
Yeah. And at that point, of course, Rock was a meth cook. Another good choice for me. And so he was a meth cook, so there was always tons of drugs around. It seemed to me that if they didn't have drugs, I didn't want to be with them. That was...
So it was a mutual choice of bad behavior.
Yeah. Low self-esteem was the biggest driving factor.
Well, bad decisions led to 4 kids, so...
Which
not
I
all...
wouldn't change for the world.
And you got 1 out of 4 good. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, honestly, to Ashley's defense... Ash became an addict because of me. If I wouldn't have been using and...
So what's my excuse?
For not being an addict?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't use drugs with you.
Not with me?
No. But I didn't sit down with Ashley. The only reason why Ashley could be around me is if she was doing the drugs with me. Because... that was what my main priority was the drugs. And chose to use drugs so that she could be with me, if you get that.
Yeah, I get it. But also, that doesn't excuse
No.
being an adult
No.
and knowing what's right from wrong.
No. She's her own person now.
But I do understand, I guess, the initial wanting to bond and wanting to be
a mom-daughter thing.
Sure.
But so I met Rock, and that's when my criminal behavior started. Actually, my criminal behavior started when I was falsely arrested for a black woman.
Yeah, I think you told this story on the last.
Did I?
Yeah.
So that's when my criminal behavior started. But so I lost my job at Herberger's, and that's when the check writing began. And it was more. The police basically, did I say this on the last episode? How the police thought that it was a large forgery ring.
Yes. Yeah.
And that I was labeled
the ringleader.
Yeah, of a 3-state forgery ring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of covered all that in the last episode.
Okay.
But so now, real quick, I just want to cover this before we move on to the next thing that I really want to talk about. You asked me about, just because this is kind of a thought-provoking question, how I felt in all this stuff. And even now, trying to think about it, I can't really answer that. Because, like, I knew when things were right and when things were wrong and when things were, like, good and bad. But, like, I kind of just chose to, I'll just go hang out with my friends. Or, like, I didn't really choose to think about it. But at the same time...
Well, you were too little at first when this was going on.
Sure, okay, yeah. But I'm more thinking about when I was 8. Because 8 was about when I had to move with Grandma. Because I was in 2nd grade.
Well, before that, I had gone to prison.
I don't remember that time.
You don't remember that at all?
Not really. I do remember living with Grandma Ellen, when I was younger.
Well, you were with my mom for my first bout in prison. You were with my mom.
I think the one thing that I do kind of remember, I do like vaguely remember that, just because it was young. I don't have very.
You were
memory.
3.
But here's what I'll say. I never knew why any of it was happening. And I never asked. I never questioned why.
Right.
I just knew that this is this is reality. This is what it is. And like, I guess I kind of just disassociated. I just never cared why. It never like struck me as to why is this happening. And I never like sought the answer. I was just like, this is what it is. And now this is my life how it is. And this is what I'm just going to go on with life the way it is.
Right.
And that's how it was. I never thought to question why. It never even bothered to question why.
Well, wasn't it strange to you that one day your mom was in your life and then the next minute she wasn't there anymore?
I'm sure it was at the moment, but like I don't have residual like trauma, or maybe I do, and it's just like bottled up somewhere inside, and like that's why I have certain tendencies in my life now. But I can't like take you back mentally and pinpoint how I felt at that time, because it's not like a staying point for me.
I remember this was a really touching story that my mom told me about you. The first time that they took me to prison, I had this robe that I always wore. And you picked up that robe, and because it smelled like me, you hung on to that robe for...
That was my blankie.
Yeah, forever. But she said when you smelled it, that was it. You held on to it. Because
I'm sure there's... So, okay, here's an interesting thing. So, like you said, you would think you being there and then not being there would be like a very traumatic experience. But I can't pinpoint that.
Right.
I can't like remember making that connection. However, I can very distinctly remember you dropping me off at daycare for the first time and being completely, like, just traumatized.
Really?
Yeah. And, like, you leaving me. And, like, I'm left at Little Flower Daycare.
Right.
I distinctly remember that.
You hated it.
Yeah, I definitely hated it for the first few, whatever. I think I ended up kind of liking it, didn't I?
No.
I have some vaguely fond memories. But, no, I distinctly remember being dropped off at daycare and just, like, crying.
At that time, I was doing good, though.
Sure.
Well, I mean, as good could be for me.
But it is interesting to think, like, that stuck in my head.
Right.
Like, I do remember that, but I don't remember being
Going
there
to
and then not
prison.
being there.
And coming down to the jail to visit you.
I remember that.
Do you?
Oh, I remember all that.
But I wasn't locked up very long that time, mostly because I found out that I was pregnant.
See, okay, that I think maybe that part's a little more vague to me because those are years of my life I don't really remember. But
Right.
even still, the next time you went, which I would have been like in second grade-ish, second or third grade,
Yeah.
I don't really have like a fond, like a distinct memory of when that happened.
Well, that was the second time that I went. No. Was that the time when our house got sold?
Yes.
How old were
Yeah.
you? That's when?
Mhm. Because Landon was born. Landon grew up in that house.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he didn't grow up in that house, but he was
He's a
an
baby.
infant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been that time. And then, but there was a middle time too, because then we had the McDougal house.
That was after I got out the second time.
Yeah.
That was after I discharged my sentence. The first time, and I can't remember if we talked about this last time. The first time I went to prison, I got sentenced to 31 and a half years.
Okay, I don't remember that.
With good time, I could discharge it in 15.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't do that long in there before I got released. So the first time wasn't when Asia was born. There was a second time that I went, and that's when I was pregnant with her.
Okay. So that's the second time.
And that's when
Then the third time would have been when.
we lived on McDougal.
No. So you said the second time was when you were pregnant with Asia?
No, the second time was when I was pregnant with Asia.
So then there was a third time,
Yeah.
and that would have been.
when we lived on McDougal.
No. That would have been when. That would have been between Pueblo and McDougal.
Because I remember when I got arrested when we lived on Pueblo, I signed my power of attorney over to your uncle.
So that was then, but then, so there was a time between then and the McDougal house.
Yeah.
And the McDougal house would have been around, it would have only been like a couple years maybe.
Yeah.
Because that was 2000, like 5?
Right.
Because that's when.
It was in 2002 when your uncle took our house and sold it.
Okay, well.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about that.
I mean, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, we lost our house.
Yeah.
So when I got out that time, we didn't have a house. We didn't have a car. We didn't have anything. Everything was gone.
And we lived at.
Grandma Ellen's.
And also.
And then I got that crappy trailer on McDougal.
Yeah.
That ghetto ass trailer.
It was horrible. And then that's when that was the long stint.
Yeah, that's when I went for 6 years.
Yes. Because it was like 2005-ish till
17. No, 2007.
17, I was going to say.
2007
Yeah.
is when I went over to Passages.
Yeah. Cuz I was middle school. 7? Are you sure? No, that can't be right. I was in the middle of high school.
Junior high.
No, cuz I lived here junior high. I lived here all of junior high with Dawn. And then we lived at the Miles Avenue house, kind of.
Okay. All right.
So it would have been like 2009.
Okay.
It was like 2009 or 10. Because I would have been like a freshman or a junior. Or a freshman or a sophomore. Because I remember living at the apartment on the south side in high school.
Yeah.
But it was only like maybe 2 or 3 years of high school.
Yeah.
Because we ended my high school year at the Clark house.
Yep. You're right.
But we only lived at that apartment for like maybe 2 years.
Yeah, it was 2 years, which was a really nice apartment.
But now that I think about it, it would have been like my freshman year that we lived at the apartment. Because I remember hanging out with Eric.
Yeah.
But also I remember hanging out with... It was like maybe the middle of freshman year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would have been like 2009. 2010.
Well, I don't know if... So, I was locked up when Asia was born in 96.
Mm-hmm.
And she was born while I was in prison.
Yes.
As well as her twin sister, China.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that was the hardest time. Going up to the hospital.
Well, we kind of talked about this
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. I kind of forget what we talked about.
But one thing we didn't talk about that I really actually do kind of want to talk about is let's talk about time in prison.
Okay.
Like, that's kind of something I don't really know a lot, like, that you've never really talked about.
Well, it's because it wasn't exactly something that I wanted to talk about to anybody, you know?
Well, we don't gotta, like, get too deep into it, but...
Well, I mean, prison is not hard to do. It's easy to be behind the walls because that's all you can think about. You can't think about what's going on in the outside world.
Mm.
But you miss your children so terribly bad when you're locked up. I mean, like I say, your meals are prepared for you, your beds are ordered for you. You know, it's completely an irresponsible place to be because you're not responsible at all for anything. I guess it wouldn't be irresponsible, but there's no responsibility at all on you.
Mm.
So basically, you're not learning how to live in the outside world. You're learning how to live in a confined place. You know, you get to see your kids
Once a week, maybe?
Yeah, once a week. If somebody would bring them down for visiting.
Mm-hmm.
Might get to see them for family day where, I mean, that you have to remember coming down for family days and stuff.
Many times.
Yeah.
We had the one-on-one sessions.
Yeah.
And then we had, like, the big family days, which
Yeah.
were on, like, once...
a month
Yeah.
or something like that. Yeah. But I didn't see you guys hardly that much. It's hard. It's hard to see somebody from the outside.
Oh, I'm sure.
But being in prison is just like being in prison. You know, there's crazy things that go on. And it's not something that I really like talking about.
Fair.
You know, I know I missed you guys. You know I missed out on a lot with you guys.
Well, let me just ask a few questions, and if you
'Kay.
choose not to answer them, no pressure.
'Kay.
What's the craziest thing you remember seeing? Or, like, the thing that kind of, like, just stunned you at the moment? Or maybe even something that, like, still sticks with you? Either seeing or hearing.
I really can't pinpoint anything. I mean, there were fights and stuff like that.
Because obviously this is a women's prison, so
Right.
I have to imagine there's got to be some...
Lesbian?
Well, that's not what I was going to go for at all, but thank you for that. I was going to say there has to be some kind of, like, difference between men's prisons and women's prisons.
Oh,
Probably
yeah.
similarities, but also, like, because it's very, like, obviously men and women are different in a lot of different ways.
Well, I mean, I never saw anybody get shanked.
Okay.
You know, but I remember, and this was probably one of the things, I remember being in the gym, and there was this girl named Alverna, and we all had our little cliques. You know, you had your little crew that you traveled with all the time. Well, Alverna The crew that I was in was probably the most controlling crew in the prison as far as that goes. And Alverna wanted to be in our group that we ran with. And there was a girl that was a snitch and came to prison a snitch. And we were in the gym. And so Alverna could get her stripe, which would be to move up to our group. You had to do something that wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
And so this girl being a snitch, we needed to teach her a lesson. And so Alverna dropped a 10-pound weight on her head.
Jesus.
And, of course, did damage to the girl, But she got her stripe.
Mm-hmm.
I can also remember that was
One
that
of the more...
that went on quite a bit.
Things like that.
So that you could move up in crews. There was, like I say, we were probably the biggest crew that was in there.
So what like compiled this crew? Was it like certain...
They called the OGs.
Okay, so like you had to be in there for a while?
Yeah.
Okay. Or like a frequent flyer?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how you moved up. Was just like as you got more respected in there.
Was there any particular inmate that you remember had just like a vile crime that just doesn't...
Oh yeah, there was a lot.
Who were some of the more like vile criminals?
A 17-year-old came in because she had been babysitting a child and she fed him Drano. There was another lady that was in there for dressing up like Indian and tying her landlords to a pole and scalping them.
Jeez.
There was another lady in there that had tied somebody that owed her $20 for a bag of weed, tied him to a tree and let the grizzly bear eat him.
Jesus.
There was another lady that chopped her husband up and put him down in the well. There were several women in there that had killed their children by suffocation.
So, as somebody who obviously was not a violent criminal,
right,
but did, obviously you're there with these same violent criminals, what is that dynamic like?
Well, the violent criminals were my best friends.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Or how?
Because you knew they were going to be there for a long time. When you're looking at doing a long time, you want to be around people that have done a long time or are doing a long time.
But I gotta imagine that's like kind of difficult to like sit there and like have a conversation with somebody who murdered their children.
When you're in prison, you don't talk about your crime.
Okay. But you knew.
Yeah, we knew. We heard from other people.
But it's just kind of like the rule of law. You just like don't talk about it. You don't like, you kind of just forget about it. Like you're stuck here together.
You don't ask. In fact, one of my best friends had, and this is terrible. Well, they kidnapped and murdered some guy, and she peeled his skin off with a toenail clipper.
Jesus.
And she became one of my best friends. It's just like, you don't look at the person for their crime. You look at the person for the person when you're in there.
I just feel like that's probably hard to like look past that. Like what's stopping them from doing that to you? Like, just clearly there's something like missing upstairs. Yeah. So it's like, what's stopping them from just snapping? And
well, you have to remember that.
I guess being their enemy would make that a lot easier.
Yeah.
So befriending somebody who's...
It's better to have them in front of you than behind you.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, when you're in prison, you don't trust anybody anyway.
Yeah.
You don't put your trust in anybody when they're in. The only person you can depend on when you're in there is yourself.
Here's a question.
Okay.
Contraband.
Okay.
A lot of contraband or
no? A lot
of
contraband.
Okay, and methods of contraband? Am I not... Is this like something that's not allowed?
No, it's fine. Mostly keister in it.
Well, okay, yeah. But like...
How does it come in?
Yeah.
through visiting.
Uh-huh.
People would bring it in their baby's diapers. You know, they'd hold it in their mouth when they came in. When we went back, we all had to get strip searched.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, I mean, there was a chance to go to the bathroom when you were visiting. So a lot of stuff came in that way. By getting it passed through visiting and then it getting keistered and then carrying it back in.
What was like aside from drugs, which makes the most sense, what's the most common, like, what did you notice was the most common contraband?
Well, drugs.
Okay, but besides drugs.
Cigarettes.
Oh, okay. Well,
lighters, things like that. I mean, it wasn't like lipstick for sure.
Now, I vaguely remember you saying something about like being able to get TVs and like items that were like personal items for you.
Yeah.
Like, kind of go through that. Like, okay, let's talk real quick. Let's kind of like start from the beginning more. Like the cell itself, like being in a cell, having a cellie, like go through that.
Okay. Well, when you're down in minimum security, basically you don't have a cell door. You know, basically they're rooms like, I want to say like a motel room kind of, but you're sharing it with 4 other people when you're down in minimum security.
Okay.
When you're in medium security, you're upstairs and you're in a cell. You know, you're locked down. Not 24 hours a day. You know, you can... Actually, prison is so much easier than county time that it's ridiculous. County time is your hard time.
Okay, why is that?
Because you're locked down all the time. You have none of the
freedoms of
prison. You know, you don't have, like, there would be a time in prison where we could order Bath and Body Works. You know, we could get packets sent in to us with tennis shoes. Tennis shoes were a big clout thing in prison. You know, that everybody wanted nice shoes. That was just the thing. And they could get sent in once a year through JCPenney's. We could get nice things ordered. That's no longer the way. Now it's a set canteen. But back then we were pampered prisoners. We really were.
How do you get these things?
Somebody from the outside would order them.
Okay.
I mean, there was a specific list that could be ordered, you
Sure.
know. But we even had our own sheets sent in. You know, I mean, that part of prison was easy. County jail was hard. I mean, I've seen people jump off second story. You know, I've seen people hang themselves with their hair. I mean,
Interesting that would be harder. You would think
county time.
Well, you'd think the longer sentence would be the harder thing.
Prison was easy.
How long is county, generally?
Well, I was in there for 22 months.
Dude.
I mean, I remember
That's long.
my skin was gray when I came out of county to go to prison. My skin was gray because it's all recircled air and there's very little sunlight. So, I mean, that was the hardest time that I ever did was 22 months in county.
Interesting. I did not know that.
You know, I mean, you wash your own underwear out in the toilet. You know, it's savage in county jail. It really is. Food sucks. The food in prison was good. I mean, we had a salad bar. We had a pop machine. You know, prison is a walk in the park. Like I say, as long as you keep your head in the walls and don't think about what's going on outside. Like, I didn't know where you kids were. I could never find, after my mom died, then you guys were with Grandma Ellen, and there was no stable phone number for me to call.
Yeah, that was true.
There was no stable place for me to write you guys a letter.
So here's just to wrap it up, because we
Okay.
don't need to like keep on the prison talk.
Okay.
But how do you stay informed about like world events going on?
You have TVs.
Okay, so you are like aware of
Yeah.
events going on in the
Yeah.
world, like elections and
Like, I can remember when,
yeah. What was like some of the bigger events that maybe?
I remember watching when 9/11 happened. I remember watching through this little slat in my door at county jail the reenactment of the plane hitting the Twin Towers.
You were in jail when 9/11 happened?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Because I distinctly remember still being at the Pueblo house when that happened.
9/11, when did that happen?
2001.
Yeah, I was in county jail.
Maybe I'm wrong. Then.
Yeah, you were still at the Pueblo house because that's when the house got sold.
Because September, yeah.
Yeah, you were living there with Grandma.
Okay.
Because my mom had passed away.
With Grandma Ellen?
Ellen, yeah. And it was shortly thereafter then that the house got sold and you guys had to move to a motel.
Yeah, my timeline's all fucked up.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to remember.
But I do distinctly remember 9/11 happening when I was in I would have been like second or third. It would have been second grade.
Yeah. And I remember watching it. I didn't understand what was going on because we had one TV. Of course, when you're in county jail, you don't have TVs in your room. But I remember looking out the little tiny window and the TV was down there. And I remember seeing the plane hit the Twin Towers.
Wild.
So, yeah, you do get a newspaper in there. It's hard to keep up on current events, but you really don't want to either. You don't want to know what's going on.
Because you don't want to miss what you're... Right. You don't want to be missing out.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's go back to... let's go forward to, like, current.
My charges now.
Well, I was going to say, let's go to... You're released the last time.
Okay. Essentially.
Right. Let's go from there.
Well, I mean, let's go to now because there's a lot of little so now I'm in drug court. Okay. And I tell you, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I've been in the criminal system for 35 years. I've been using for 45 years, at least. And that's a long time. And if this is the first time ever that I've been offered treatment in the outside world.
And so how'd that come about?
Okay, well, I was under investigation through the Montana Task Force for harboring a fugitive with 100 pounds of methamphetamine.
We'll leave that name anonymous.
Yeah.
And then you're going to tell me after we shut off the lights.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, I got subpoenaed to the grand jury, which was a huge thing.
And this is what? When?
2 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, I also got charged with theft of Pierce flooring.
Yes, I remember this.
Okay, I got charged with that, but I beat that. The only thing I got for that was knowing that somebody did it and not telling. I knew who did it, but I didn't tell. So I'm the only one that got charged with that whole thing. And I got conspiracy because I knew who did it. But basically all those charges of theft and everything else got dropped. But when they got dropped is when they started investigating me.
For the other thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Went to Passages?
No, that's when they gave me drug court. Passages. Oh, yeah, you're right. I did go to Passages on that for 3 years, or for 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And then that's when the task force started investigating me. They raided my apartment, actually, where I live, in a 55 and older community. They raided my apartment, and nobody even saw. Nobody in those apartments saw that happen. And
it was 5 o'clock. Everyone was asleep.
No, actually, it was in broad daylight when I was coming to your birthday party.
Oh, interesting.
But I never told you guys any of this because, I mean, seriously, I just kept it to myself and stewed on it myself, worried about it because I didn't know there'd be Christmas where I didn't know if I was going to be for the next Christmas at all because they were looking at trying to give me 20 years.
Jeez.
But I just held it to myself. I didn't tell you guys at all anything that was going on. I'd be going to court. I'd be fighting it. Sometimes I go to court 2 times a week. But I still just pretended like I was the same old person. But it was a very emotional roller coaster for like 2 years.
But now,
Now,
1 year
yep,
officially, right?
yep. Drug court's been a blessing to me. I mean, I can't say enough about the drug court. I wish it had been in existence several years ago. I probably wouldn't be in this position. But I guess all in all, I wish I had done better with my life. I really do.
Yeah, but that's not worth dwelling on.
No, it's not, because I am who I am today, and I like myself today.
That's all that really you can do.
Yeah, I can't live in the past.
No, that's not. Yeah, nobody can.
No.
So, for anybody struggling currently with substances or abusive relationships or anything like that, what can you recommend for them if they're listening?
Well, I can recommend that you need to talk to somebody. You need to get the help that you can, but just reach out to somebody. Because being a victim or being an addict is not a shameful thing. It's not something that you should feel bad about yourself. You should seek out and try to get help.
And where can people maybe go for that?
Go to the mental health center. If you go to the YWCA, you can go almost anywhere to seek help. There's a lot of hotlines, whatnot. Just don't get yourself involved in mixed up in something that forces you to have to go to drug treatment. Try and seek that out before it's too late.
Well, good. I figured that'd be good information to get out there.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up because I'm starving.
I am too.
Positive, or real quick, is there anything else you want to add before we close this out?
No.
Is there any thing that you had in mind that you wanted to touch on?
No.
Okay. Then let's end it with a positive or motivational message. I do not remember what you said last time, but it can be the same if it ends up being the same.
Well, I think that just like you said on your last podcast, just to be the person that you can be, just to be the best that you can be. Don't try and be somebody else. Don't think that just because you've had a strong, sad lifestyle that you don't need to carry that with you. Live each day for each day.
Yeah. I think that's pretty well said.
Thanks.
And I agree with that. Live each day. I don't know. Leave the past in the past.
Yeah, you can't change it. You can't dwell on it because you can't change it. There's nothing that you can go back and redo.
I mean, you can change the future.
You can.
You can affect the future. You can't change the past, but you can change the course for the future.
Just like with you kids. I mean, I so wish that I had a chance to go back and redo that, but I can't. So all I can do from this day forward is to be the best mom and the best grandma that I can be. And just know that that's enough. Yeah. I can't do any better than just be what I am today.
Indeed. And that's a good way to go out.
Yep.
Well, that's part 3 technically, because you've been on 3 times.
Yeah.
But not. I think that pretty much wraps up the life story aspect of it, right?
Yeah, it does.
So next time we have you on, we'll just bullshit about random stuff.
Okay.
But people were clamoring for this one. You were guest of the year last year.
Yeah. I don't think this one was the best.
I disagree. Really? I think we listened back and it's pretty well put together.
Really?
I mean, it's the continuation from the last episode.
Right.
So again, if anybody hasn't listened to the last episode, go back and listen to the one before. I don't remember what number it was, but
I don't either.
But you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's Shellie Fisher number 2.
But I appreciate you having me on, and like I say, and I want to say this, I'm really proud of you, Dakota.
And actually, now that you mentioned that, I did want to thank you for always supporting me with the music and the podcast and just decisions I've made, whether they were good or bad.
Well, it makes me feel good to be a mom. You know, I mean, that's probably what moms do, and it makes me feel good when you reach out to me to ask me for advice, because I've always wanted to be that mom that you can kind of look up to a little bit.
Well, it's definitely taken some time. I won't sugarcoat that,
Right.
but it's gotten there.
It's gotten there, yeah. It's
So-
gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's the positive.
I'll say this too, just for anybody out there, and I've said this before on the podcast. You can have estranged relationships with your family members. It doesn't, like, whatever that may be, your brother, sister, mother, father, aunt, uncle, friends. You can have estranged relationships with anybody who's close to you in life. Time heals all wounds,
Yes.
and it's never too late to reconnect with somebody if you were the one who needs to connect out, or if you're the one who feels like you've been betrayed. You can always, it's never too late in any
No, it's
situation
not.
to mend a relationship, if you so choose.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's not for everybody. Some people,
It takes so much energy to hold grudges and toward anger toward people. It's so much easier just to let go of that, just to be positive and let go of that, because it does nothing but wear you down, trying to hold on to all that resentment.
indeed, I agree. Well, let's go get some din din.
Sounds good.
Thank you all for listening. Much appreciation. If you wouldn't mind, please give us a like, share, subscribe. Go watch the previous episodes and watch all past episodes, because they're all fun.
They are.
But most importantly, don't forget, life's a garden. Dig it.
Just gotta keep on